Okay. Looks like we're live and ready to start our meeting. So I think let's go ahead and begin. I know that Dave Lockley will be with us. He just texted me, and I suspect Heather Espinosa will be too. But thank you all for making that rushed transition to this meeting, and really appreciate you being here. We are meeting to discuss elementary planning time for educators who are special education instructors or educators. And this is a subcommittee charged by the IBS negotiations team. So let's start by doing some introductions. And I think I'll just call on you in the order I see you in my screen so we don't step on each other's audio. Tell us who you are and what position you hold in the district, and maybe how long you've been in the district doing the work that you do for our kids. Anne, would you begin?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Ann Caslon. I work at Riverdale Elementary as a learning specialist, and this is my 8th year there and in the district.
Great. Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Taylor, principal at Hillcrest, and I've been in the district for 17 years.
Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Minter. I'm one of the elementary coordinators for special education. I've been in the district for 16 years, and I was previously a learning specialist.
You were previously a learning specialist? Is that what you said? Great. Thank you. Ashley?
I'm Ashley Toomey. I'm a special education coordinator for elementary, and I've been in the district for 14 years.
Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Gooding, assistant principal at Meridian, and I have been in the district since 2007 in lots of different roles and various ends of the spectrum. So I've been there, and looks like Ashley and we've been in the district about the exact same amount of time.
Katrina?
I'm Katrina Matthews. I'm a learning specialist at Tarboro Elementary, and I've been in the district 10 years.
Valerie?
Hi, I'm Valerie Miller. I am a learning specialist at Northmore Elementary School, and I have been in the district, I think, 12 years now.
Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Gracious. I'm the director of elementary for student support services. I used to be one of the young ones that wasn't in the district that long, but I now beat all of you at 19 years.
Do you say Elena or Alana?
It's Alana.
Alana.
I'm Alana Burrow. I'm a learning specialist at Silver Creek Elementary. I've been in the district 13 years, 14 years if you count the student teaching.
Oh, I love it when we can get you from student teaching. We like to bring them in because we make them fall in love with the district, and then we keep them. It's my recruiting strategy.
I do love the district. It was my second career, so I'm not a young one either. I've been in another career 11 years. So
Nice. My name is Mila Shepard. I'm the Chief of Human Resources, and I have been in the district. This is my 4th year. So I'm the relative rookie and surrounded by lots of good history, deep history with the district and deep subject knowledge, I know. So Dave and I appreciate your willingness to serve and to help us think through this issue. I'll give you just a little bit of background, and I would invite Heather Gracious, Jason, I think you were on IBS during the time that maybe we initially started talking about elementary plan time. But many of you know that last year, one of the big IBS negotiation topics was this issue of elementary plan time, trying to put some specific parameters. We changed the bell times. And during the course of that work, as we tried to determine what's really the best way to make sure that our elementary educators have the plan time they need, that it's somewhat consistent or equitable to other levels, secondary level teachers and educators. You know, it was thorny, it was not easy. And one of the side issues we identified was special educators are a whole different breed of cat. They have a whole different set of planning needs, and we should spend some time looking at that. So we considered the work only partially done at the end of last year's negotiations, and we created a charge, the IBS negotiations team, which you see on the agenda, which was that during this school year, the 2021 school year, we, the district and the association together, would form a study committee, so that's us, to make recommendations regarding the definition of planning time for special education educators and the appropriate amount and structure of planning time for special education educators in elementary schools. So that's the work, just that, right? And Heather, Dave, and I had a pre-meeting, and we did some brainstorming about, well, you know, how do we want to shape the work? And so we thought initially that we're going to need to spend some time defining the duties and the responsibilities of general education teachers versus special education teachers. You know, there are differences. And so just being on the same page about what those differences are and educating ourselves as to what are the factors that we need to consider when we think about planning time. We also thought that identifying, you know, just a complete list of compliance and instructional related duties and responsibilities. The special education world is heavily regulated and a lot of legal non-negotiables. And so understanding those, naming them, considering them in our work is going to be really important. And so I predict that will take us most of our meeting time tonight. And that before we end, we should set some next meeting times together as a group, and group calendaring is a challenge, but if we can just get a general sense of what works and what doesn't, we'll set a few subsequent meetings. Other tasks that we identified, you see listed in the sort of the future meetings box, identifying the number of minutes you need to accomplish some of those required IDEA activities. What changes are we going to have to make to staffing or scheduling in order to incorporate those? Do we need to change our allocations, our staffing allocations? So this conversation could be wide-ranging, and there might be other things that we determine we need to address as well. So let me pause there for a minute and just see if my friends who've been involved in this process have any additions, or if any of you have any questions.
I do have an addition. I think that it's important, you recognize that the special educators that are on here are learning specialists. And we had decided, you know, special ed has such a wide range of providers. And we thought that we would just start with our learning specialists. There is I believe we'll have probably a multi-year process where we address program teachers because their jobs look so very different than a learning specialist, and then our related services staff. So I don't want you to think that this work is going to be applicable to all of those groups, but we can just focus on our learning specialist from here.
Really good clarification. Thanks, Heather. Other questions, other comments? Other topics that you think, what about this? It would seem obvious that we need to consider something else. Hi, Heather Espinosa.
Hello, sorry to be late.
I was just telling the group that you are no doubt trying to rush at the end of your day to a place where you can be having this meeting. And we were laughing that we know each other's commuting habits because we've spent a lot of time hanging out in IBS.
I have. And actually, I'm still at work.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not home even.
I zoomed out of one meeting to zoom into y'all. So sorry.
Wow. Thanks for being here with us. We just finished doing some introductions. And so if you would just introduce yourself, your role, how long you've been in the district.
I'm Heather Espinosa. I teach second grade over at Wood Glen, and I believe this is the 17th year in the district.
All right. And as I've said, you serve on our negotiations team. So you and Heather are kind of links back to the main negotiations team. Okay, and I think I will try to take notes on a minutes document, and I'm going to share it with you so that you can be looking at it as if you've got a computer screen to look at, so that you can just, if you're visual, you can kind of track along with us. Remember, anybody out in the audience who's watching, I'm sorry, won't be able to see it, but we will be kind of referencing that. Special Ed Plan Time Committee. Let's see here. That's it. All right, sending this to you now. And okay, so we talked a little bit about the main work of this particular meeting would be to begin with just brainstorming a little bit about the duties and the responsibilities of general education teachers and special education teachers. And I can't do a Venn diagram. My talents don't go that far on a Google Shared Doc, but I think if we think about it like that, maybe we would have things that are unique to each role. And then there might be things that both roles do. But I think it would be helpful perhaps to just brainstorm some of the planning, some of the needs for planning and compliance activities that have to go on for, so I'll say special needs teachers and specifically learning specialists, right, Heather, given the comments you made a little bit early.
Yeah, Mila, I feel like maybe just one more piece of clarification would be helpful. We have a fairly inconsistent pattern across the district of teachers who have established plan time every single day of the week, and that's it. And then we have this other planning structure where there's planning time Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and some take Wednesdays to plan and do IEP meetings and whatnot. And so that Wednesday time sometimes is defined as planning and sometimes it's not. And so I think getting just really consistent with what is planning, what is IEP related duties, what do we want to call that, could be helpful for us to kind of level the playing field and have some consistency across the district.
I wonder too if that is also driven by the caseload of the providers, if they have time Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday to build in a consistent plan time. Just a wondering.
So Heather, would you suggest that we need to sort of track perhaps activities or tasks in a couple of categories, like planning versus IEP? How would you title that? Jump into the document and feel free to.
Yeah, I would. I think that to me, and Heather, you can contribute to this too based on our conversations, but I think that the IEP management is the one distinct difference that I can identify in my own head between special and general ed. And also perhaps, just depending on caseload, the number of like groups to prep for, or those types of things. I'm not sure if that is going to be a substantial part of our conversation, but I think it should be. So probably instructional responsibilities. Maybe if you're comfortable with this, we can call it compliance responsibilities. And then we obviously all have the responsibility of the collaboration. So I'm wondering too, Mila, if we want to pull up the definitions that we had established for elementary providers around the collaboration time and the instructional planning or individual planning, that could be helpful.
Sure, yeah.
When you say collaborative time, are you meaning collaboration between learning specialists or between gen ed and learning specialists, or both?
I think that's something that we have to talk about because there's so much collaboration that needs to happen. And so maybe listing out all of the different expectations of collaboration for a special educator could kind of start to separate our non-existent Venn diagram.
Heather, let you keep leading in this conversation, and I'm going to pull up some of that other language, but maybe you can start to pick a category and start to elicit some of that. That'd be okay?
Yes, but I have to unmute myself. So why don't we just start with the instructional responsibilities, because I think that there's some similarities there. And Mila, I don't know how structured you want to be closer to negotiations, but it's helpful just for order and so that we're not talking on top of each other, just to throw your hand up, which is now located in the reactions button. Do you all see that? Give me a thumbs up if you see that. Okay.
Stephanie's an advanced learner. And Jay's giving you the virtual thumbs up.
There's no hand up. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but there's the thumbs up, there's a clap, there's a heart, and a crying face.
Let's avoid the crying face, but you know.
I think it's a happy tears face.
Okay, all right.
I think the hand up is in the participants list.
Is it they changed it last week?
I don't know.
No, it's in the reaction. I just put my hand up. It's in reaction.
Okay.
I found it in the participants.
Yeah, I do think it depends on if you're on a Chromebook or
Oh, there you go.
they look different on each device.
All right, great. Okay, so Stephanie, let's just start with you, because now I still see your hand.
Oh, I don't see my hand, so.
Mila, I see your hand though.
Okay. Well, my question was, would you like me to take notes?
Yes, that would be fabulous.
That would be.
So Mila, did you have something that you wanted to?
No, is my hand down now?
Now it's down, yes.
Okay.
All right, so just throw your hand up if you have something that you want to contribute, and I will monitor this screen, and Stephanie, you can monitor the note screen.
Can you just repeat or re-clarify what we're focused on?
Yep, so starting with, did I say instruction? Starting with our instructional responsibilities as special educators, what is involved in those tasks? Alana.
So preparing for our lessons for our groups, which is similar to a general education teacher. I taught in the classroom too, so I kind of, have a feeling for what we both need to do and then how it's different with preparing for lessons.
That's great. I didn't know that, but you're going to be a great participant in this group then. Alana, can you specify from in your building how many groups you prepare for in an average day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday?
For myself, I prepare for seven groups usually in an average day.
Okay. Katrina.
Sorry, I was counting my groups. That's what I was just going to reiterate, that planning just similar to a general education teacher, although we are planning for several groups a day, which adds a little bit, it's timely. So I have 14 groups that I plan for a day.
Valerie.
Just to give, I'm right in the middle. I'm at 11, and it honestly from year to year really varies. I do think that this year feels in some ways a little heavier because of the COVID restrictions that we started with and smaller groups and trying to limit that. So, but I do feel like in some ways it has been increasing in my experience, that I'm having more and more, and some of them are short. So, but it still to me requires the same amount of plan. So it could be 7, it could be, it could be 11, and they could be some short 15-minuters in there, but it still, in my opinion, is the equal amount of plan for each one. Doesn't matter if it's a longer group or a shorter group. It feels like it's still that kind of required plan time.
Okay. Alana.
I just wanted to clarify that I'm 0.5 right now. So the 7, I would say that, yeah, for full time, I'm sure they're planning for many more groups. And I agree with Valerie that whether it's a 45-minute group or a 15-minute group, you do feel like you want to get all those elements, all those pieces into the lesson plan. And so sometimes it's even more challenging to lesson plan for those shorter groups, I feel like.
Super helpful clarification. Thanks for bringing that back up. Katrina.
I think it also, and I know we're living in the world of the pandemic and we're hoping that next year is different. But I think it's added another layer of complexity to planning this year because we have to try to keep as cohorts or, you know, our cohorts similar. So we may have more levels in a group based off of the grade level, which then you're planning for multiple levels in that one session, which obviously isn't ideal, but it's our current reality. So that kind of adds another layer on to planning.
Thanks. That's a good clarification. I am hopeful that next year we would get back to some type of normal, but I think because this is part of an article that's going to stay in our master agreement, hopefully for quite a long time, I'd like for us to try to think about a typical year and some of the ebbs and flows of that and the responsibilities for that. Milo, would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is language that ideally will be in there for many years. And if we need to alter or adjust it, we have mechanisms to do temporary letters of agreement that would alter this typical contract language. But let's aim for what is typical if we can.
So what are some other instructional responsibilities that you all can think of? Valerie.
Oh, sorry, I was unmuted already. I think the piece of when especially in SPED, there's not curriculum for everything. There's a lot of pulling, creating, making, probably a little less as a learning specialist. I was also an SSN teacher and there was a ton more in that realm. But especially I think when you're in the first 5 years of being a learning specialist, there's a piece of really like figuring out how to differentiate for all those students, grabbing up the different kinds of materials, finding things to meet those needs. So yes, our BLAST, our LLI, some of those number worlds do meet very nicely some of the needs of students, but I think that I spend a lot of time like searching out what else could I use. So in my planning, I'm definitely, researching other things, finding other books, just trying to really make it more unique, which is what that whole piece of SPED is supposed to be. And so that's a piece of it.
So I might just add on to that if you're okay with that, Valerie. I think that the specialized portion of our jobs and the instruction lends itself to more individualization of skills that we have to teach.
Exact words I was looking for.
And I just think that
Zoom, you get like frozen. So sorry. Yeah. Specialized was the word I was looking for.
Yeah. So you're right. We don't have the magic bullet, the magic curriculum that meets all of our students' needs. Anne.
Something else that I try to do is, and this kind of falls under collaboration with the classroom teacher, but I really try to support DDI cycles that are going on in the school to get the kids. I like to give them just a little boost before they actually start that DDI cycle, so they just have more confidence going in that. And so it might just maybe be 2 or 3 minutes of something that I can support a piece of that for the kids. So that's something that I think about while I'm planning as well.
So like pre-teaching or reinforcing skills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Alana.
Hopefully it ties into their goal as well.
Yeah.
Part of it too is planning for social skills and social interactions that between students, so within lessons, or if I go out onto recess or into a classroom, things that I'm also looking for, or there's been students that I plan for that need special skills instructions for social skills. So preparing social stories and that sort of thing, that takes up some time. As well as planning, kind of like was just said about the DDI. I spent last summer kind of creating for K through 5 my own template for each unit of everyday math for each grade level, so that I have a template I can go through and pull the most important information that the students are learning in their classroom in that unit, and I can kind of mesh that with our IEP goals and see how I can provide instruction and pre-teach some of those skills or reteach those skills that they're learning along with their curriculum if they are in the everyday math curriculum.
Okay. Anne, your hand was still up. Is it up? Is it residually up? Okay. Katrina.
One thing I was just thinking of was also supporting and not necessarily planning, but prepping for those executive functioning pieces, whether that's some type of work system in the general education classroom or what have you, that still takes time. I'm not necessarily planning in-depth lessons for that, but the prep of that and the collaborate, and I know we're going to talk about collaboration, but just the communication with the classroom teachers and stuff also is kind of another layer in that.
So preparing accommodations, perhaps, like as a global, is it that you're providing the direct instruction on executive functioning, or you're helping the student to be successful in general ed?
It's both pieces of that.
Yeah, I think it's good to call out both.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Valerie?
Yeah, exactly what Katrina said. I think there are a lot of pieces, and maybe it's not on a daily basis in the planning, but for especially our kids who are in an alternative kind of math curriculum, the teacher may need some more planning around how to help them in the classroom, how to adjust their curriculum and what they're teaching to meet their needs. So maybe pooling materials, working with teachers. It may be observing them in the classroom to kind of see where the issues are. It would vary from day to day, from student to student, from need to need. So I couldn't say that there's a certain amount of time, and there may be days that once I have a system in place, we're good to go, but then you get a new student or you have new things that arise. So it's a lot of collaboration with the teacher, then pulling those materials and then taking the time to think through, like, what else could they do during the classroom if they can't be successful during this activity.
Hi, Dave.
I'm just going to apologize. I'm super sorry. It's just been one of those days where I thought I was going to get out of a meeting on time, and then I didn't. And so I'm sure none of you have had that experience before. So I do apologize for my tardiness.
We got it. And we are, as you can see, we are rocking and rolling, and I can see that you're in the shared document. So you are a witness to our progress. So Heather's leading and Stephanie's note taking. So we got it.
Stephanie.
I think it's implicit in here, but there's additional time spent on planning and analyzing assessment, and that's within the DDI cycle. But I think it's a little more, especially with individualized plans for kids. So planning and prepping for assessment.
And just for my own clarification, would you all view progress monitoring differently than what Stephanie just said? Sherry?
I think it would depend on the purpose for the progress monitoring. There's the daily kind of progress monitoring that we do to inform our instruction. And then there's the progress monitoring that we would do for progress reports, and then also for IEP meetings. So I do think it depends.
So I would put it under both, if Stephanie, if you can capture it in both places. Can you help me clarify, Sherry? So you mentioned 3 types, the progress monitoring for assessment, the progress monitoring for our progress reports, and then the IEP. Do you see the IEP as a separate type of progress monitoring, or would you use the first 2 pieces of data to write into the IEP?
You would use them, but you may also need to do additional progress monitoring or informal assessments in order to inform that document.
Okay, so I would put progress monitoring twice, Stephanie, under the compliance piece, but for 2 different purposes. I think just for clarity, calling that out. And thank you for dealing with my bossy organizational techniques. Anything else about instruction? Question for the group. I'm curious if we might want to, and Mila and Dave, tell me if I'm out of turn here, but if we might want to gather information from learning specialists on the number of groups that they prep for on a typical day.
I think that would be the right space. My only question is, do we want to do it on day or week? Just because I know sometimes, there's some variability throughout the week. So most stuff we do it like in a 5 or 10 day window, but not knowing the learning specialist schedule as well as probably I should, I couldn't tell you if that would be a better or worse approach. But most things when we calculate them, we do them in either 5 or 10 day increments when it gets to the contract space.
And typically, and learning specialists push back on me, but our services a lot of times are developed on the 4-day cycle. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or the minutes are established like weekly. Would anybody disagree with that? And so if we did, I just think that looking at a Wednesday schedule would not give us what we need. I think that's my point. And so go ahead, Mila.
So I'll just kind of, in the notes below the table, I'll just keep a running list, because often in these subcommittees, we find ourselves needing to go out to the field and gather information. So I'll just keep a list of things that we think we might want to go out as next steps and gather.
Perfect. Anne.
Just ask a couple questions about Wednesdays. Like, this is kind of the first year that I seem to have like a full day of groups on Wednesday. And what my Wednesday groups look like is there are those extra minutes beyond the normal 120 minutes a week. Maybe I have a student with 180 minutes or 150. So I'm filling those extra minutes in on Wednesdays with maybe even a smaller group. So I'm wondering maybe how many learning specialists are doing that to meet those extra minutes and how we can look at that.
Go ahead, Alana. Did you want to respond to that?
I too am pulling students on Wednesday as well, just because it's a different type of year. But typically it's not something that we've done in the past. We've had that Wednesday time for IEP meetings and for formal assessments and then progress monitoring. But this year, because it's a different year, I have seen some students pulled or some remote groups on Wednesdays.
Okay. Val?
We have not traditionally pulled kids on Wednesdays, though we leave it as a complete option, especially for those kiddos that move in that don't fit with the norm of what we already have going on. They definitely fall in there. We do that supplemental minutes For ones that we can't quite fit in, we might do that additional, or for kids that need that 5 days a week, they need that being touched on that 5th day in some way. So we also leave it open. I would say that this year, right now, as of today, my co-teacher, he does see a couple groups, very short ones. I don't, but in years past, we definitely have had anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, but it has been very difficult this year, not because of COVID, but because of the schedule change to do our meetings. Either before school has not been an option at our school, and it has not been an option, obviously, to do them after school because of contract. Where that's where we were trying to put in some meetings per kind of some directive of like, you can do them Mondays other than Wednesday. So we were trying to have them after school to do annuals. We can't do that anymore. Parents are refusing to do it before, and I get it because they're trying to get their kids to school and it is quite early. So it's really been to do them on Wednesday. Otherwise we're having to miss groups or make up minutes. It's just been really difficult. So I think that option of doing groups on Wednesdays has been more difficult to be consistent with that.
Okay. Ashley.
I do wonder if it would be worthwhile, though, in addition to that survey, to see how many groups, what their current structure is, if they're seeing kids 5 days or 4 days, because I do think over the past couple of years, we've encouraged people to look at that as an option. And I know in the COVID space, there were times where we were much more able to kind of hit that 5 day a week period, but kind of what's their model now, and do they plan to continue that going forward too, just to get a gauge on who has made adjustments and when and how they're getting that done, and if it's working or not working, and if they plan to shift back to that Wednesday open next year.
Okay. Dave.
So it sounds very similar to the work that Mila and I did with our specials team and figuring out minutes and scheduling and whatnot when we did special, like art, music, PE at the elementary school. And how we did that analyzing work is that we separated like Wednesdays and the other 4 days of the week. And literally we looked at a schedule, right? Like we just had them design a typical schedule for them, right? Knowing that every week kind of sometimes gets funky, but the standard kind of where they try to fit people in. And I wonder if we were to do something like that, something from what they did a year ago, and something they're doing right now might be a good way of looking at it, because that's the current reality. And then what was a more typical reality. And if, you were doing exactly a year ago last week, like what groups you had or something like that might be something that would give us both spaces. But I do really like Ashley's question, as a reflective space of, this is what you're doing now. This is what what were you doing? But what are you planning on doing next year as you're trying to wrap all your heads around next year's services?
Great point. I'm curious how you all would define whether it's instruction or compliance, the implementation, or even if it's an issue, it might not be for you all, the implementation of behavior plans. Katrina.
I think it's both. I see it under both. I think there's a lot of teaching and instruction that goes into behavior plans and working with students, but there's also a lot of planning that takes place for them as well as collaboration between school social worker, classroom teacher, the team in general. So I feel that it's kind of everywhere.
So we could put like behavior plan implementation under instruction. And then we could also put it under, yeah, I agree with you. Put it under compliance and collaboration, really. Do you feel like that typically falls, does that typically fall to you all as learning specialists, or does that fall heavier onto mental health people? Valerie?
I think just having had quite a few different mental health people, it depends on your mental health person. It depends on how competent they are, not competent, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but just how experienced they are with that. If they are really seasoned, then I feel like they can take a lot of that on. And so for like past couple of years, I've been involved in the collaboration piece and maybe in creating of materials, but it has been fell more on the mental health in my building. But in previous years I think that I was more involved in the actual writing of the plan, but now it might be just a collaboration meeting and helping come up with some resources. I think that it's more heavy in the creation of it. Then once it's going, then maybe there's less that I have to do. But I think that really just depends on your mental health team.
Any other learning specialists want to weigh in on that, or anyone? Sherry?
I do think that we are relying upon learning specialists to provide instruction and in behavior and executive functioning much more now than ever before, because we're seeing our students have an increased need for that support. And so we are dependent upon our learning specialists to be kind of a jack of all trades and master of all as well, in providing that support for our kiddos. And so that also means that we need to consider what kinds of additional professional learning that they may need for that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Val?
Thank you, Sherry. I think even so, I mean, I've been doing this forever, but executive functioning is something that every year it feels like I have more and more kids, and it is so important. Yet I'll be the first to raise my hand and say I always have to call on help for writing those goals, for understanding how to implement it, and it requires a lot more time and collaboration with working with the gen ed, with working with mental health, and I do definitely value it, but it sometimes falls to the wayside when I'm like trying to plan those reading lessons. But I see its importance, but it is something that it falls off the to-do list constantly because there is just so much else to do. And I don't feel as knowledgeable in that area at all.
I appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you for saying that. Okay. Do you feel like we've kind of reached the max of the instructional components? And we can always come back and add other things as they come up, and that does happen, that something we're talking about sparks. And so just let us know, and Stephanie will go back and add it in. All right, let's focus on compliance. What are some compliance-related tasks that special educators have to do? I cannot believe everybody's hand is not up right now. Thank you, Valerie.
I mean, just the writing of the IEP, the progress monitoring, evaluation reports, testing, the prior written notices, the meeting notices, getting things translated. I could go on and on. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
It is, but I wonder if we might need to repeat those for Stephanie.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we have planning and preparing for assessment. All the progress monitoring we talked about would live in instructional tasks and compliance. I have implementation of the BIP, writing IEP, eval reports, testing, PWN, and translations.
I mean, we have the writing of, we have the just progress monitoring, and then we have the doing of the writing up of the progress reports. Gosh, over the years, it's definitely increased in a good way. I mean, I definitely think we're documenting. I am doing a ton of documenting in PLP with every conversation that I'm having with parents. And then I'm also documenting in Enrich. There's that piece of compliance. Yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but I'm sure that other learning specialists have ideas too.
I just want to call out, first of all, thank you so much for doing all that documentation, but just for the non-special educators on the call, my rule of thumb is that if you don't document it, it didn't happen. And so in all real, that's a real issue, because whenever we do have to end up in court or in some kind of state complaint or mediation, that's the rule. So kind of calling that out, Valerie, I think is important. Oh, it's the HR rule too. Perfect. That's great. Yeah. So Katrina, thank you.
I want to say all of what Valerie said and piggyback on observations that need to be completed for tries and initials for SLD qualification. And just the daily, I know this isn't necessary. I don't know if this is compliance or what, but I think it was last year. I'm sure this has been on the docket forever, but I remember a conversation about it last year, taking attendance every single day, documenting what students showed up for group and what you did. That has taken, I know it's such a small little piece, but it's another minute of my time in my 30 minutes or my 15 minutes that I have with kids. And it's every single group, every single day. So that adds another piece there. And then I think Valerie said this, but just inputting all of the data too. So you get all of this data, but then it's the time that it takes to actually input it and write the reports and write the IEPs and all those pieces too.
Alana.
I was going to say what Katrina just said as far as the attendance piece, keeping track of the attendance. So an attendance binder is how I do that, but also the progress monitoring, there's the reviewing, the grading it, and then inputting it. And that documentation piece, everybody does it differently, but I have Google Forms that I keep for each student that I keep my data in so that I can pull it up wherever I am to write the IEP, because I never write IEPs or evaluation reports at school. It's at home. So I need all that data in my Google Drive to do that. And I imagine a lot of people do that too, because the compliance issues you have time for during the day are attendance and testing and the observations, the things you can do with students. And then outside the day is when I have time to, write that IEP. And I think that's what a lot of us do. So I think, there's that piece and documenting as far as when I do email a parent or call, I keep my own documentation where I feel like I can write more detailed notes for myself than necessarily in PLP than what I put in there.
Stephanie.
How about scheduling with parents for meetings, tracking all of that down? And would we want to delineate a case manager in this compliance piece too, because there are more roles for a case manager in these situations?
Yeah, I think that in my opinion, it's kind of inherent, like you are case managers for many of these kids, but then I'm also thinking about the fact that I have Sherry in my head, like you might just be the primary provider and not the service coordinator. So what are your thoughts on that, Valerie?
Well, I just think it's a different level of paperwork that has to be done and a different level of collaboration that has to be done. So when you're the kind of the team lead for that kiddo and also their primary provider, you're just having to communicate a lot more with different and if they involve, related services that are not typically in the building, that's another layer of communication, whether you're working with the DHH team or you're working with the audiologist so there's a lot more. I just find with those kiddos, there's a lot more phone calls that have to be made, a lot more returning emails. I could spend my entire plan just returning emails and not actually doing the plan piece. So, and I'm sure that's with everyone, that's not, unique, but it is, I think as case manager or that team lead for the kiddo, it's just more paperwork.
Okay. Jason, I feel like your hand was up next.
Yeah, just probably about the same time Stephanie's was, because she said something similar to what I was thinking too, just the management of the scheduling. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert to the same level that all of you guys are. I see what you go through and I see what our teachers go through and I see what they have to, what the compliance piece adds. I myself have been a 504 coordinator for a lot of years, and I know that doesn't rise to the same level, but I do get an impression from that as to the extent to which what people have to deal with in terms of managing schedules, the compliance piece, just even the idea that the added stress that a lot of people don't quite grasp until you've actually done this job or been in this role, that the added level of stress in just complying, keeping track of notes, scheduling, juggling, all that, because anything that you do can be used in front of an advocate, can be analyzed by an attorney at any time, and every move that you make has to be even more well thought out than most people would deal with. So I mean, I just want it to be known the extent of management that we ask our special services providers to do and what an added stress that is for them.
Thank you. Katrina?
Going along with that case management, thank you, Jason. Going along with that case management piece, then it's like you have all this information, but then you have to close out the IEP. You have to close everything out, finalize everything, make sure dates are correct, make sure everybody has their information in, goals are in, standards, all that, so that we're checking over while everyone does their work. We're still double checking their work and making sure that the IEP is in compliance, which takes time. So that adds it too.
I think to add to that, translation services. Valerie.
And I think that this also happens in gen ed, but there's a parent piece too that for just under the compliance of like talking with parents and having those conversations, keeping them in the loop, that goes beyond just your IEP meeting. So I think there's also that piece that it can be more intense depending on, you know, your caseload and who you have. But I definitely think there is some parents requiring a lot more back and forth the communication from that may also fall under that compliance.
Yeah. Sherry.
When you said translation services, it reminded me that if a student has a second language, that it would require for initials or reevals that we also collaborate and do all of the paperwork for the BCT team. So that is an additional piece that would be on the case manager's shoulders.
Yeah, so that would go under both compliance and collaboration. Valerie?
Which Sherry just made me think of, it kind of brought up the initials. We're also responsible for, and this is also building to building, but it may be progress monitoring as we go into the initial. It may be working with the teachers to develop what they're going to progress monitor as we go into an initial or reeval. So for some teachers, they are doing, you know, they can handle those interventions. I personally don't do the interventions, but I may have to meet with the teachers to develop what they're supposed to be doing related to kind of that MTSS process. Some schools are more developed with their MTSS team, but I know that in some schools it falls very much on the special education teachers to do that gen ed piece of either developing. I know some schools, they are actually doing the progress monitoring before the kid is staffed or actually providing that intervention.
And you made me think, Valerie, about back to the instructional bucket. And I don't know if this is on there because I'm trying to watch the screen and not the notes, but planning for our push-in services. Like, we're not just responsible for our own groups that we host, but is it a different planning component or instructional component when you do push in, Katrina?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I know we touched on this a little bit, but about the accommodations and the modifications too that go into that, especially like if we're talking about Like right now, some of our students are working on an opinion writing project. Well, you know, a lot of my kids can't write a 5-page paper or 5-paragraph paper. So then working on those accommodations or those modifications of providing framed paragraphs or providing sentence stems, or, you know, those pieces that while it is direct instruction, I still have to plan for that instruction piece of that. And once you get it down, you know, year after year, if standards stay the same and those kinds of things, we can reuse them, but it's that upfront planning piece of that for that instruction for staying in compliance with accommodations.
What about additional plans? Go ahead, Stephanie.
In terms of staying in compliance with accommodations, also supporting testing, CMAS with small group accommodations.
So just looking at the notes, do we want to define a bit more the assessment requirements? Go ahead, Val.
Do you mean when you say assessment, because that makes me also think assessment for evaluation, are you talking about CMAS and MAPS and PALS? Or are you talking, because I see that as assessment, or are we talking assessment for evaluation?
Yes.
Yes to both?
I mean, honestly, it's an expectation, right? That we have to do diagnostic assessments, progress monitoring. We need to be proctoring, those types of things.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that you're, yes, all of it. So I think that there's both sets of evaluation that we're looking at. And again, that's a year to year, changes every single year with how many kids are going to need what. And not even looking at what this year is, but looking at just typical over the last 5 years. It's definitely gotten a little easier with MAPS now reading the test to kids. That has made a world of difference, and so some things get easier, some things get harder.
Anything about additional plans or the transportation? Go ahead, Val. You're muted though.
ESY, am I still muted? Okay, the planning of ESY, the piece that goes into creating and getting all of that ready, whether you're doing ESY. I don't know that with my kiddos that have had like communication plans or those kinds of more specific, I don't know that I've had to be more than just collaborating on those plans. But yeah, the transportation, though, it may be just a once a year kind of thing to look at and plan for. Unique accommodations requests when we were doing those, that's a paperwork piece, a meeting. So those would be some other things that it would fall under compliance.
Katrina.
Audits, that's a paperwork piece.
Say that again. What did you say?
When we have to do our audits, if an IEP gets pulled for an audit, the paperwork piece that we have to go through for that.
A file review for,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. And granted, that doesn't happen, that maybe happen once every couple of years, but it happened to us this year. So that's why it's on my mind.
Go ahead, Alana.
I do think there's a difference in my mind between the preparation for CMAS and because part of that is also seeing if we're required to give some sort of assessment to see if they'll qualify for certain accommodations on CMAS math. So there's a chunk of my time that I have to pull students and administer that so that that can be sent to the state or whomever makes that decision. And I feel that that's kind of a different when I'm supporting MAPS or CMAS testing than when I'm doing a diagnostic or a standardized assessment for an initial or a reevaluation. I kind of treat those differently, and they hit different parts of my day, where the diagnostic and standardized assessments for the evaluations, typically we do those on Wednesdays. CMAS and MAPS are outside of our control because it's school-based. So, you know, it might hit during different days and force us to rearrange groups and that sort of thing.
All of these seasonal tasks that we have, right? I think it could be important for the notes just to call out that we are time bound with a lot of the compliance tasks. So, you know, we have to have all of our IEPs updated and in compliance before December 1st. I mean, I think that those are things that, you know, there's ESY timelines, there's timelines for CMAS and unique accommodations. So everything is time bound within special education. Alana, did you have something else? Nope. Okay. One more thing I'm thinking about is assistive technology, and it could fall heavier under the collaboration, but I think it could fall under other categories. So what's your response to that? Go ahead, Val.
Well, just depending on what kiddos you have coming in, if they're coming in with devices, there's a level of training, a level of working with, you know, if it's for speech, working with the speech therapist to see how it's going to be implemented. So it's a lot of collab. And so I'm not sure that it's going to be emails back and forth with your assistive tech team on getting devices. It might be time out of your day at the end of the day to go pick up devices. I know that there has been in the past people that would be willing to bring things and stuff like that, but there are times when you need a test, you have to run up to the ESC to pick up that test kit. I see a lot of shaking heads because I think that's been, ever since we got rid of the pony system for test kits, that's been another one of like, okay, I got to go pick up this testing kit that kind of deviates off the assistive tech. But that was a piece of going and picking up assistive tech from ESC if it couldn't be delivered. But I do think working with the gen ed and the related service providers on those pieces, or we did trainings at our building on teaching teachers how to use Google Read and Write. So there was a planning for the training, having the trainings, meeting with teachers when they were not as familiar with it. So when new things are rolled out, whether it's the Number World's online games, just teaching teachers, getting accounts set up so that kids can access different things like that. I know I'm keep heading off in different directions, but every time I bring something up, I think, oh, what about this?
Yep, that's exactly what we want you to do though. What else in regard to compliance? Try to think through like a year, right? What are the seasons of things that we have to think about from a compliance standpoint? Go ahead. You're muted.
Wow. Transfer plans. We do a lot of that beginning of the year paperwork, which will also require for some families meetings.
Amendments.
Also end of year meetings. I've in the last couple of years had a lot more meetings with other schools to prepare kids for leaving the district or coming into the district. There's a lot more, and that's great, but it does require that time to set up the meetings, have the meetings. And those, they might not fall completely under compliance because I don't know that they're required all the time, but it is that piece of good faith that you're, meeting with the team and the parents. So we're having more of those between, not always in Adams 12, but with neighboring districts.
Yeah. Alana?
And then meeting with incoming kindergartners at the beginning of the year or at the May or April before to go observe them in their preschools, as well as at the end of the year meeting with the middle school to roll our students up to middle school. And then I was thinking at the beginning of the year, there's just it's a process of the setting up, making sure we have our spreadsheets and we know minutes and who needs what and what new students have come in, as well as communicating the compliance issues of the student snapshots and accommodations that we need to get out to every classroom teacher and specials teacher, and making sure they have everything they need at the beginning of the year for those accommodations.
Go ahead, Katrina.
This is a small piece, but the permission to speak to outside agencies. So just getting that put together and getting that finalized and organized, I guess.
Some of these I'm sensing are melding into collaboration as well. So why don't we move into that space? I do just want to acknowledge that a lot of the like sending out the IEP snapshots, those types of things, they are compliance tasks and collaboration tasks, because if you don't do it, you're going to be in compliance jail, right? So, all right, so let's start talking about collaboration. Go ahead, Valerie. Get your fingers ready, Stephanie. She's going to list them off.
No, I won't. I just want to preface by saying that ideally what collaboration should be and what it is in reality, because we don't have the time, and I'm sure Gen Ed feels the same way. It's just, there's not enough hours to have it. But when it can happen properly and when you are able to meet with classroom teachers, meet with your team, it's beautiful and it works really well, but there is just not the time in the day. So collaboration with the Gen Ed, collaboration with your administration, there's collaboration with your team members, there's collaboration with outside. So whether I'm using my coordinator to talk through evaluations coming up, so there's a lot of collaboration with kind of the next level above the teachers that happens on a pretty regular basis. Collaboration with parents, sometimes we have separate meetings for that.
Anne?
I agree with all of those. They're so important, and it feels really good when you can do that. I know that our team, and this year we haven't been able to do it because we're not all supposed to be in the same room, but we would just kind of gravitate towards each other at the end of the day and just debrief about our day, talk about those kids. Coordinators and specialists in the district are just so crucial for us, and they just may come up with a great idea for a student. Admin, I think you did, Valerie, mention admin as well. It's hard to find those minutes, but it feels good when you can.
Yep. Ashley?
I think too, when you think about collaboration, especially within the team, there's kind of different layers of collaboration that need to happen, like more of the ticky-tacky, like, are these scheduled? When's this coming up kind of conversations within your team meeting? And then the deeper conversations that we really want to have, like starting an evaluation, during an evaluation, checking in, and then like that pre-meeting going into either an annual or initial or re-eval, and being able to understand everyone's kind of assessment data and what that is showing us, so we really can implement a good plan that is kind of coming from every angle. So I think there's different levels and purposes for that collaboration even within the team. And I think also probably between general ed and special ed, like what are some things that we always just have to talk about to kind of check off our list, and then those deeper conversations about what are you seeing in the classroom for the student? What am I seeing? How do we connect this? How do we connect what you're teaching to what I'm teaching? And depending on the availability and the time constraints, how deep those conversations are able to go.
Alana?
I agree with what Ashley and Anne both said. Typically, there's that layer that we meet with each other on a daily basis, just to kind of check in. But then we have the weekly scheduled special education meetings for our whole team. is there along with our administrator, our assistant principal, and then our district coordinator is invited in, you know, whenever, but comes in for certain times. So she knows that that's our scheduled time. And that is very helpful because that's the time we get to talk about students that came up in MTSS, or students that are, you know, parents are requesting testing or to check in with how an evaluation is going. So that is a very helpful time. We've also tried to do different ways to collaborate on a weekly or on a regular basis with the classroom teachers, and that's more variable from year to year with what the teachers want as far as support. We always, you know, meet our collaboration as far as our minutes on the IEP for individual students, but then we want to offer that support to the general education teachers that they can come to us. So in the past, we've done office hours. We've done office hours by grade level. And then we've put Thursdays where we would check in with 2 grade levels every Thursday so that we could go to their team meetings, just because that happened to be the day when there are less other meetings. We're not having a staff meeting or other meetings. Of course, this year is different since it's all Zoom, but in years past, we've tried those. Every year we try with good intentions, and then, you know, things get busy, classroom teachers get busy, they have other things they also need to do during their planning time. So, but that's what we've tried in the past for collaboration.
Great. Val?
And I'm not sure this is the appropriate place for it, but I don't have common plan time with my team, which result in additional collaboration. So I can have it at one meeting, but since one person can't be present or my teammate might not be present because we don't have that common plan, and that is something we ideally try to do, but because of our individualized services, or in the way we have to schedule, it doesn't happen a lot, which then I think makes it where I'm having to do multiple collaboration meetings with different people in order to say, okay, this is what happened in this meeting. And there may be better systems for that, but it feels like it's resulting in more meetings in order to fill in everyone.
I do think that that could potentially be something that we want to ask our learning specialists. Do they have common plan time with special ed, or who they do have common plan time with? Anne. Oh, no more Anne. Katrina.
Sorry, I forgot to turn it off. I'm not very good at that.
It's all right.
Just to piggyback of what Valerie was saying, the load of the meeting, the load of the collaboration meetings that we have. So sometimes I can have a meeting every single day of the week for collaboration purposes, whether it's collaborating with classroom teachers or MTSS or my own team, or, you know, just collaborating with one specific teacher on a student. But the load of collaboration meetings that we have is quite heavy. And then also collaborating with outside agencies. Some of our minutes do require us to collaborate with outside agencies. So we have to find time to do that as well. And then also the collaboration that you have to have with general education teachers in order to gather data for IEP meetings, for progress reports, for evaluation reports, those kinds of things too. Oh, and then going over snapshots with general education teachers. I don't know if that's how schools do it at the beginning. All schools do it, but we sit down and meet with our general education teachers at the beginning of every year and go over those snapshots.
Great. Stephanie.
Just in addition, another layer to consider is are the students who are duly identified in collaboration with ELD. As well as if the learning specialist is pushing in, that has to be intentional collaboration and consistent.
What about collaboration with your, if you have 2E kids, so you're gifted, does that type of collaboration, should that count as well? Okay. So Mila and Dave, I'm just looking at time.
So was I, Heather. And I wondered if this wasn't a good point to just sort of pause. What a good conversation. I'm just sitting here going, wow, there's a lot of busyness. No wonder our colleagues look so tired at the end of the day. And speaking of end of the days, I'm looking at calendars and I'm trying to pick some future meetings. I wonder if you have a sense of how many more meetings we might need to schedule. I was sort of thinking almost like a weekly thing for four or so more times at least, given just what I was hearing and where we might need to go. But I don't know if that's too much of a burden for folks. Dave, do you have some thoughts about frequency of meetings, numbers of meetings? Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility that we could do one more meeting where we're collecting this kind of information and then getting a writing group to build a survey. And that survey component can be done electronically, like the back and forth on the actual drafting of the survey and feedback on that survey. And then I think we would need 1 to 2 meetings to review the data and then start moving in a recommendation space. That's kind of what I was thinking. And I understand that if somebody's sitting here going like, oh my gosh, Dave, that's a whole bunch of time. I don't know if I can make it. Please know that like we honor and respect your voices at all times. And whatever you can contribute is going to be a great value. And if you have to be gone or like Dave and have like 5 meetings all at the same time and end up having to be late to everything, that's okay too, right? Like that's life. We're all professionals. And, my ask would be if you can't make something, that's why we use these Google Docs for minutes and that kind of stuff to be able to add and contribute throughout the process. I don't know, Heather or Myla, does that sound like a good starting place with the numbers that I was describing? One more to kind of finish gathering the data and then schedule some for reviewing and moving to maybe a recommendation space after that? Or am I being way too ambitious in my timelines again?
You're always ambitious, and I always appreciate it. I think that that's the right fit for me. I would be very interested to hear from Heather, as I always am, just being my negotiations twin. I think that we really need to be clear about what is unique to special ed and what is also a priority, a responsibility of general ed. So I think 1 more hour-and-a-half meeting and then a subgroup to put together the survey makes sense. And then a couple follow-ups.
So as I've been looking at calendars, all of our calendar times, I'm kind of zeroing in on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I know Wednesdays are both good and bad. I mean, there's a lot that goes on Wednesdays, but on the other hand, sometimes there's flexibility to meet. I see some Thursdays that look like they could be potential. And to Dave's point, not every day is perfect for everyone. Let me just ask about the concept of Wednesdays. Is there like oh, Myla, you're killing us if you schedule on Wednesdays, or is it just as good as any other day?
Wednesdays work for me.
Is that?
We tend to have less school meetings on Wednesdays. Like I feel like there's less that goes on, like those additional grade level chair meetings and stuff like that. They don't seem to get scheduled on Wednesdays, but it might be just my school.
I'm looking at this same time, this sort of 3:30 to 5. Is this a good time? Did anybody just have to, was 3:30 realistic for starting? Can we start a little earlier, or is 3:30 good?
I think it depends on the Wednesday too, Myla. Like looking at next week, this group has professional learning that ends at what time, Sherry? 3:15?
Yeah.
Is it 3:15 this year? Or did we move it back a little? Okay.
We have ERD on until 3:15.
Okay. Okay. So no earlier than 3:30 is. I am looking at the 4th as like next Wednesday, the 4th, as a possibility, 3:30 to 5. I was looking at the 10th.
3rd.
Thank you. Well, I was looking at the 4th, Thursday.
Thursday.
How,
I was gonna say, Mila, you and I already have a meeting at 3:30 on the 3rd. So
I know. I meant the 4th. I really did mean Thursday in that case. Trying not to just hog up one day of the week for you. Looking at March 4th, looking then at the following Wednesday, March 10th. Well, so if we did March 4th next week as this follow-up meeting, and then we could have a smaller subgroup just do the writing of the survey questions electronically, communicate back and forth. We probably wouldn't need another meeting until we'd had a chance to gather some data. Maybe that would be the week of March, like March 18th. How's that feeling? I mean, I think a lot of this is I send you the invitations and you look and you go, ugh, you know, and then you can either move things around as best you can, or we respect that you'll participate maybe just a little more remotely. But and then maybe put a hold on the Wednesday, March 31st, when we are back from spring break. And then and probably, you know, that's a couple meetings post survey, so
It could be helpful for folks to understand that there's an end that we need for negotiation so that we can bring it back to the table. And what was that, Dave? April?
Yeah, so I wasn't, because I apologize for being late. I'm not sure if I wasn't sure if that timeline was described.
I did not.
In order for us to be able to accomplish any changes in the agreement this year, or any additions, or even really the extension of this work, we would need to have kind of a recommendation wrapped up by that middle week of April, so that we could start the transition from this group's great thinking as the experts in the field of this topic to you know, the folks like Heather and Mila and I, who are have to then try to translate it to everyone else. So sometimes if I ask dumb questions, it's because I have to translate it into like the way I think, so I can then explain it to the rest of the universe. And so please don't take my questions as anything other than just trying to translate and understand for myself. But if we can explain it to me, we can explain it to anybody. But yeah, it would be the middle of April would be the end of the work altogether, as far as the timeline for this project.
I think I might just schedule one more on April 7th, just in case we need it, and to hold it on your calendars. And then that would be the extent of the time we have. And, you know, sometimes we get to that point and a subcommittee will say, we're not ready. You know, we just have a lot more work to do. And that's an okay answer too. We can take it into the next year of negotiations, but our goal, and I have optimism, you guys got a lot done tonight, that we could nail this down and have a recommendation for IBS. So I'm going to send you just this handful of invitations and a little bit of a map. I'll sort of map it out on the bottom of our notes page, and then I'll create an agenda and we'll publicly post it and do this same routine over again for all of our next meetings.
Looks like a couple hands popped up. Stephanie, do you have something? Okay, Katrina.
Miley, can you just read off those dates again?
Yeah, you bet. Right now I'm thinking the 4th, the 18th, the 31st, and the 7th of April.
Sounds great. Thank you for sending those out, Mila.
Yeah,
And, you know, I know Dave and Mila are facilitating this really, but I am so pleased that we have this group together. I know how busy everyone is, but wow, it's impressive when you do put it all on paper. And I am just very appreciative of each and every one of you for giving us this time, but for also so clearly articulating what it is that you as a group do. You have a big burden with this work, because we're really planning the life of a special educator from here for hopefully multiple years. So I'm appreciative of you all coming together to do this.
Roddy points out that he thinks March 4th is an IBS meeting. He's probably right. Watch for updates from me on your calendars. We'll figure it out. Yeah, we don't think so, Roddy,
It's
but
the 11th.
yeah, we think it's the 11th, sir. But okay, well, with that, we are a little bit over time, and we absolutely want to respect that. If you have a snow dance ritual that you want to do, you just knock yourself out for tomorrow. But be safe as you do get out onto the roads at some point. And thank you, and we will see you soon, and have a great evening.
Thank you for all your work, guys.
Thanks, everybody.